Hi, I'm Kelly Webster. I'm the director of the Writing Center and colleague of Kate Ryan's at the University of Montana. And I want to answer number 3, which was, what kind of administrator do you want to be and what are the possibilities afforded to such a role? And maybe try to give a response to number 8, which I think is the hard question to answer. I arrived in my current role as a director of the Writing Center by sort of a circuitous route after many iterations as a teacher and as a Writing Center person. But in all of the places that I've been, there's always been one constant, and this is certainly true of the University of Montana as well, and that is that I often find myself having to communicate with non-writing folks the value of what we do. And if your situations are anything like the University of Montana, you probably constantly find yourself having to argue for funding, having to justify your existence, having to explain over and over the value of what you do and why you do it. So what kind of administrator do I want to be? I want to be able to more gracefully and effectively translate our value for these varied audiences, which in our case is usually students, faculty, or administrators. And especially to find a way to do this without compromising the ethos of a writing center, not losing too much in that translation, finding ways to tell our whole story when we're being asked to measure in numbers what we do in the Writing Center. Bethany earlier in one of the videos was talking about trust, and I want to trust this translation process rather than being resentful that I have to translate and being suspicious of it. I want to be able to, I think, build enough trust with these non-writing composition people to be able to bridge those gaps of understanding. So the second part of the question is, what possibilities are afforded to such a role, I guess, as translator? And I think an obvious possibility is developing more flexibility in communication. What kinds of metaphors can I use to describe the Writing Center to administrators, to faculty from across the disciplines, to students who expect that we just edit their papers? How can I find ways to respond to the rhetoric of complaint about students writing, to be more flexible and being able to come up with responses to those things? And I guess the other obvious benefits or possibilities afforded to the translator role is in the act of being forced to translate what we do in many different ways over and over. What can I learn from that act of translation? What new meanings can I find in our work when I'm being forced to explain it in these different ways for these different audiences? And in thinking about how, and this is the hard question, how can we reframe these victim narratives as a field? For me, I think one way that I can reframe the victim narrative, because I find myself sometimes, especially in talking to administrators trying to argue for funding, feeling a little frustrated that I've told the story 1,000 times and I'm trying to explain yet again what we do and why we do it and why we do it the way that we do. One way I can reframe this is for me to begin to tell myself the story that my job is to tell the story 1,000 times and to be a translator and to find new ways to express the meaning and the value of what we do. And for me to stop fixating on what I'm losing in translation, but rather to start thinking about what I can learn from the act of having to translate. So, what kind of administrator do I want to be? I want to be able to be more graceful and effective in translating what we do in the Writing Center for the many different audiences that we face in our campus community, which I imagine are the same audiences that many other writing folks are having to communicate with across the country.